What is going on, guys? Today we are talking about oil change on the Shelby. There's a lot of conflicting information about these engines. This is specifically going to apply to the 2007 through 2012. 13, 14 they went to the 5.8, which is different than the 5.4. Now the first and the most important thing I'm going to talk about in this video is the conflicting data on how much oil these engines hold. Now if you look at your 2012 Mustang owner's manual, flip to your capacities page, it doesn't even list the 5.4. You've got the 3.7, 6 quarts, and you've got the 5 liter at 8 quarts. So we're going to have to go elsewhere to find the correct capacity for the Shelby. Now, one thing I see happen all the time at independent shops as well as dealerships is they jump on their repair program. Might not be a Ford Direct, might be an All That or a Mitchell 1. And most of those programs actually call this engine out as 7 quarts. So you end up overfilling that engine. You definitely don't want to do that. The Shelby supplement guide that came with the car new actually calls this out right here. Engine oil, 6.5 quarts of the 550. That is the correct amount of oil to use in these engines. The next question, of course, is what oil to use. Personally, I use the Ford Motorcraft 5W50 oil. That's what came in them new. That's what they recommend. That's what you're going to get if you take your car to a Ford dealership and have the oil changed. Of course, you're always going to have people that argue that Mobil's better or Castrol's better, whatever it might be. The thing with the Motorcraft 5W50 oil is this oil does shear. So if you ever do an oil analysis after running this for any amount of time, I mean even as little as 500 miles, this oil shears down to like a 40 weight oil. The Ford engineers know this when they built this engine, and they still recommend it. I personally know of a GT500 that has 200,000 miles and has been using the Motorcraft oil since new. So I'm not going to get too tied up on, Mobil being better, anything like that. One interesting thing that I've found just cruising around on the forums online is that anyone that uses a different 5W50, that'd be Redline, Amsoil, any of them, those hold up a whole lot better. They keep their viscosity. So you actually keep that 50 weight viscosity oil throughout the oil change. And what people are seeing on oil analysis is actually more wear metals in those oils. And in theory, this could be because that 50 weight oil is just too thick. And this engine was designed to have that oil kind of shear and actually run more of a 40 weight rather than a 50. Now you can see calls out 5W50 right on the fill cap. Personally, like I said, I've just used the Motorcraft oil since I've owned this car. This one actually gets changed probably every 2,000 miles, honestly. It's usually just once a year. This is kind of just a weekend fun car, so it doesn't get driven all that much. First thing I always do is I let the car run for a little bit, get that oil a little warm, lets it thin out just a little bit. I don't let it get scalding hot where it's a pain to change. Now, so we come under the car. Of course, here's our oil pan, here's our drain plug, here's our oil filter. Everything's super easy to get to. There's no shields or anything you have to take down. Now this is a 16 size you need for the drain plug. Now you can see that oil's got a little color to it, and this oil's only got, like I said, less than 2,000 miles on it. Now normally when I do an oil change on a car like this, I usually take an oil sample and go ahead and send it off to a lab to get oil analysis done. If you haven't done this, I would recommend you go ahead and do it. A lot of places online you can search out. It's fairly inexpensive. You send your oil off to them and they'll send you a report back. Shows you if you've got wear metals, how that oil is doing. Do you need to change it more often, or are you good? It's always a good habit to get into. Since I've done it on the last 3 oil changes and they all looked good, I'm gonna skip this one and go ahead and do the next. Now the oil filter on the GT500, easy to get to, but when you take it off, you end up with oil all over this cross member. It's kind of a mess. A lot of guys have, come up with ways they'd lay things up across here to catch it. I've seen one guy actually uses like a Ziploc baggie over the filter when he removes it. I usually just go ahead and clean it all up when I'm done. But the one thing I want to talk about with the oil filter, here we've got the new one. You've got this seal. Now, when I take that old oil filter off, I want to make sure that seal comes off with the filter and it doesn't stick to the engine. What will happen is if that seal sticks to the engine and you go ahead and put your new oil filter on, it's going to leak because you're going to have it double gaskets on it, and those leak every single time. Okay, now this was a perfect example. If we look up here, you can see the gasket actually stuck to that filter housing. Got to make sure we remove that before we put that new filter on. Another thing I like to do, since this filter is straight up and down, I'll go ahead and pour some oil into the filter, into the new one, before I put it on. That just helps the system get primed with that new oil quicker, and you have a little less time, less delay of no oil pressure upon startup. Just keep in mind that whatever you put in that oil filter is part of the capacity. So if you put a 1/4 quart into the filter, then we only need to put 6 1/4 quarts in at the top. Got the new oil filter on there. Got my drain plug back in. 2 things to note. These aren't specific to the Shelby or any car. So it's just good to have it all around. Put your filter on hand tight. I mean, you can snug it on there with your hand, but you don't need to use a wrench or anything on it. And then just snug this up. You want it to be tight, but there's no reason you need to be wrenching on it. See this all too often. You get into a car and the drain plug's actually stripped out because somebody's been putting it in there too tight. Now I'm going to come back through, wipe my oil pan off, and I'll wipe this cross member down. Then I'll come back and actually probably hit it with some brake clean to get any residual off, just so I don't have any drips in my driveway or in my garage. Now once I get it what I think's close to full, I'm gonna go ahead and start the thing up, let it run for a minute or 2, shut it back off, then check that oil level. Now that I've let it run for a few minutes, shut it back off, gave it a second for the oil to drain down. I'll go ahead and check my level. Looks to be right on, so now we're done. Hope that cleared up some of your confusion that you see on the forums. How much oil does the 5.4 hold? What kind of oil should I use? What is recommended? What's the procedure? Hope all these questions are cleared up, and if you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit that like button. I'll catch you guys next time.